What's going on, everyone? So today was a little bit of an interesting day because we had FFG's stream highlighting a first look into A Lawless Time. Now, I'm going to consider this a second look, to be honest, because we actually did recently get, I think it was about a week and a half ago, the article that they dropped showcasing the two leaders of their Spotlight decks. They're no longer calling the starter decks, but the Spotlight decks that featured Jabba the Hutt and Leia Organa, alongside things like the Sarlacc Pit and Salacious Crumb, the new credit mechanics, as well as the dual aspect cards. So all kind of a first look into the mechanics, some major themes, and some things that are going to be going on with A Lawless Time. But today's stream kind of doubled down and went a little bit deeper. Honestly, nothing too concrete. The best thing, or the most concrete thing we got, was the product release timeline, which you're seeing here, where we have A Lawless Time releasing in early 2026, March, where we have the 2-year actually anniversary of Star Wars Unlimited around this time, which was when Spark Rebellion released back in 2024. We have the Twin Suns pre-constructed decks showing up in spring. This is honestly pretty exciting for those of you that are concerned with the longevity of Star Wars Unlimited. I actually just made a video, or recorded a video rather, on, kind of comments talking about Star Wars Unlimited and, its, I guess, position in the TCG space in a long-term setting, whether it's actually dying or what's happening with that. And Twin Suns is arguably one of the best directions to head in, as long as they can actually master people's interest, because the multiplayer format is one of the things that carries Magic the Gathering as well. In July, we've got Ashes of the Empire, which honestly looks like a very exciting set. And then Homeworlds in November, where we have, who knows what's going to happen with these two sets. I've made a couple of predictions where Homeworlds, could be highlighting some of the different environments and worlds that we get to see across the various different media that Star Wars Limited takes place. And then Ashes of the Empire, of course, looks like an Imperial Remnant type of set, where we're going to be kind of highlighting Mandalorian, especially the series, I would imagine, and of course everything associated with the Imperial Remnants. I'm sure there's going to be another Gideon in there as well. So that's kind of the only concrete thing we've got, but this goes on for about an hour, and we get to see all sorts of conversation talking about the various new cards, as well as highlighting a couple of brand new ones that were not showcased in the article, which we'll talk about. Realistically, though, there was a few points in here that I thought were important enough to at least mention. I'm going to leave a link to this stream down below so you guys can check it out yourselves. Really, there wasn't anything, like I said, super concrete on, okay, here is what we're doing with, the design of the game or anything like that. But they did mention that the sets 4, 5, and 6 and set 7 were all designed with the rotation in mind, and that people should be looking at these sets not as sets or cards into themselves, but rather within the context of the new meta without the first 3 sets in it. So that is something that, again, we've talked about with rotation a lot and how I am pretty excited about it. And that is something that, well, is something that a lot of people are afraid of. And so at least note that they have been constantly thinking about rotation all the way back from set 4. And set 7 was the first time, according to them, that they've had a full crew, in their words, where they've had full-time game developers sign on and actually be a part of the kind of process of building the new set. So far, I mean, it looks promising. I think the mechanics and the overall theme of the new set looks quite interesting. I think the dual aspect cards is the most exciting to me. Han Solo as a card in of itself, the 1-cost ground unit that's shielded, that allows you to get experience tokens as you attack, is honestly just a really cool card, so I'm excited to see what they come up with. As a lot of the cards that you see in the Spotlight decks, which is what we're going over today, aren't that powerful. There are a few kind of diamonds in the rough, where, cards like Darth Tyrannus, for example, that are really, really good, and then there are the vast majority that are basically unplayable in association with the Spotlight decks. With that said, let's go ahead and talk about some of the new reveals, including a new Malakili. Now, we saw the first Malakili that worked with creature units and giving you some discounts and such with, I think it was Legends of the Force. This one's a 2-cost ground unit in Cunning Villainy. It's a 2/4 Underworld tag, which makes each friendly creature unit on the board and things that you own that isn't in play gain the Underworld trait. So essentially, it makes your entire deck of creatures into creatures plus Underworld, and all your creatures on the board into creatures plus Underworld. Now, this is extremely important as, well, it's in the Spotlight deck, but with Jabba, Jabba specifically works with returning friendly Underworld units to create credit tokens. So now you can potentially return your creatures. Now, in some cases, some of the creatures are going to double up with Underworld and creature anyways, like the new Salacious Crumb, for example, is a 1 cost with the Underworld and creature tag. So it's not like it works anything with that. But this really is important in the later stages of the game when you have the Jabba the Hutt flip. Remember, that's a 6 to deploy Jabba leader. And I believe his action is along the words of you can play an Underworld unit from your hand. But if you defeated a credit while doing so, or used a credit while doing so, it would gain ambush. So now with Malakili, all of your creature units, in theory, could be played using Jabba's ability with credits to give ambush to those creatures. Now, there are a lot of creatures that are rotating out. I think I saw someone talk about like Crate Dragon, for example, which if you play like Jabba Red, Crate Dragon's a 9-drop creature unit, and you can give this Underworld, and then you can suddenly ambush out Crate Dragon on 8 resources because you can, discount it with the credit token, and now you get a overwhelming ambush unit that's a Crate Dragon. Unfortunately, that is the previous sets. You wouldn't be able to use that particular strategy in Premiere, but the idea remains the same. I think this is obviously something that I don't think is very strong, to be honest. You get a 2-resource 2/4, which is totally reasonable. There's nothing too exciting or bad about that at baseline. But trying to play an early drop to set up for late game cards, like for example, think of Admiral Piet back on set 1, where you had the 1/4 that gave your big vehicle units ambush. Like that can potentially be pretty strong, but really the strength of it therein lies the scary aspect of it rather than the actual effectiveness, because you have to play out a Piet before you're actually able to play out those vehicles. So really the only time that it became relevant was like playing a Vader, getting a Piet off the top, and then playing your vehicle units, and not just playing Piet as a baseline. And it's not like Malakili is going to survive to the late game if you play it early enough, for the most part. So we'll see, but it is interesting that this is one of the very few cards that is able to manipulate the deck, because we don't see that very often, where we're actually able to manipulate how the deck's cards are worded and what traits they have, etc. So that is quite interesting. Next up, we've got a new Lando Calrissian. This is a 5-cost ground unit in Vigilance Heroism. It's a 4/5 Rebel Underworld. It's got Sentinel, so obviously immediately thinking of like Captain Typho type effect. And then while this unit is defending, the attacker gains -1/-0. So realistically, I'm not super excited about this. This to me looks like a worse version of Chirrut. And also, at the same token, a worse version of Captain Typho, which we both have in the meta. And both are, relatively similar aspects, because you're oftentimes playing command with Vigilance, and that's where the Sentinels want to come into play anyways. But Captain Typho is 1 resource cheaper, which does matter a ton for the same stat line. It's going to be less tanky because, you're not going to give your attackers -1/-0. But -1/-0 isn't going to be that big of a difference compared to the Captain Typho. And then you have Chirrut, which is a 3/5, but also comes down a turn earlier, and then gives units -2/-0. And honestly, Chirrut in a force-based deck is going to give you that every single time an attacker attacks into that unit. And -2/-0 does cause a lot of units to have to attack multiple times to actually get through Chirrut, or in some cases, you just won't be able to get through it all that easily. I do think this has somewhat of something going for it, because we've seen how powerful Chirrut's ability has been. And so having half of that on a unit as a baseline has potential. But I do think this is more of a Spotlight deck, Sentinel, rather than a grander form of Sentinel for the rest of Premiere. But that's all for the new cards that we've got. We have some new art. Starting us off with a season, looks like 2 version of the Rebels, where we have Zeb, Sabine, Ezra, and Hera as a group. we are seeing a bunch of dual aspect cards. Now, what's interesting about it is by the time we're getting dual aspect cards, which might be something that you're like, oh, well, wouldn't this obviously work great for Hera? We're losing Hera, which is kind of unfortunate. So I'm curious what they're going to be doing with these Spectres now that they're losing kind of their hallmark leader, if they're going to reprint her as a leader, whether they're going to do leader reprints because of the rotation, or if they're not even going to bother with that and they're just going to create Spectres, and then maybe eventually at some point the Rebels and Spectres in general will be a eternal format deck. Whether Leia will be that, or not Leia, Hera will be that leader for them. But we have seen more and more and more Rebels and Spectres in general being introduced slowly. And we're even seeing with the spoiler of the Zeb that there are some pretty good ones. The Zeb being a 5 resource sentinel that comes down and deals damage to things. I mean, that's honestly pretty good, but you're going to need vigilance, aggression to play him in the first place. And then you're also going to need command cunning to get value out of his leader, or his, not leader, but his when played ability. And so kind of a tough nut to crack, and it really will depend on kind of how they go about these Spectres going forward. We still have Kanan in the format, but Kanan isn't really doing the same thing that Hera was doing, which is letting all the Spectres play together. So pretty cool art though, and I always am excited to see more Rebels content. I think this is one of those shows that is so underrated, one of those pieces of Star Wars media that is super underrated. The first season is sometimes a little bit tough to get through. I think the second season definitely improves significantly. And then, of course, the third and fourth season is really when the show starts to take off in terms of just like the, I guess, elevation of content. So it's always exciting to see more Rebels content. And of course, it has one of my favorite moments in all of Star Wars at the end of season 2. So I am always excited to see more Rebels content for, well, the game. Next up, we've got some droid art, and honestly, I cannot really place this one in terms of where this is coming from. So I'm going to rely on the comment sections because I am just doing my kind of first impressions on some of this art, and I don't exactly know where this is from. So I'm going to trust in you all to let me know. But absolutely sweet art, and more importantly, I am curious to see if the droids are going to get enough support to really start to see some sort of droid deck take place. It was always interesting to me to see things like Invisible Hand, for example, and creating a bunch of these cards that are half supporting the droid. So you have this like minor synergy, but you never could really go the full mile. Not that this is going to really make that happen, but this is something that maybe will happen in the future. And then lastly, and oh my gosh, guys, this is just like immediate goosebumps, and that is this Darth Vader image. Now, immediately, as soon as you see this, there should be an immediate thought from a Vader comic, for those of you that are interested in diving into kind of the lore of Star Wars a little bit deeper. The only thing I can think of when I see this image is all I am surrounded by is fear and dead men. From the Vader Down comic, it is probably one of the hardest quotes that Vader has ever said across any Star Wars. It is actually just the hardest quote, to be honest, from my perspective. Where we see Vader completely surrounded by a bunch of rebel fighters that, well, are supposedly about to completely get wiped by Vader. Whew, absolutely sick. I cannot wait to see if this is some sort of event or another version of Vader, but this is probably my favorite art, period, in the entire game, just because of the reference to the Vader Down comic. It is absolutely sick. So my goodness, did this give me goosebumps the first time I saw this, and whew, it is incredible, absolutely incredible. And I cannot wait to see, like I said, if this is going to be a brand new Vader, because basically every Vader art so far has been absolutely amazing, including the Legend of the Force Vader. That was one of my favorite arts as well. That is also from Rebels. when he arrives on his TIE and standing on the top of it in the rain. Absolutely incredible scene from the show, and it gave me goosebumps as well. Same thing also applies to some of the Knights of the Old Republic art, so really cool that they're able to share a few of these snippets. They also said they had one other image that they cut because they didn't want to show it right now, and I wonder if that means that they're going to be that was some sort of Legends content or something that people would immediately know. Now, this one is one that is extremely recognizable, but it's so hype that I'm not surprised that they showed it just because of what presence this art exudes. But I'm curious to know what of the 4 images did they cut that they didn't want to show yet. So, some food for thought. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below about the new sets. Let me know what you think about the new cards, and let me know what you think about the new art, and let me know if you know where that droid is placed in Star Wars media, whether it's a comic or whether it was from, for some reason it reminded me of Rogue One. Maybe I'm completely crazy there, but it reminded me of Rogue One. So if that's it, I'm going to say I won, and I was able to place it, but you guys can let me know in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching, everyone. It's been an absolute blast talking about Set 7, and I'll see you all for the next one.